Let's do that over again. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I'm your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. The Jaybefaunt channel is part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there for the JB Show on Sundays, and you can find me for the Savvy and JB Show every single Thursday, and here regularly Tuesdays at 3 p.m. So welcome back to everybody. If you guys have not already, you guys can go ahead and do me a favor, give a like to the stream. This helps me out to be able to reach more people, to help inspire and encourage and activate and inform as well. So thank you very much for that. If you have not already, you guys can also go to my Substack, so you guys can also get aware of whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles at jaybefaunt.substack.com. So you guys have that there. And if you guys would like to email me any information or just words of encouragement, you guys can email me. My new email is jaybefaunt@gmail.com. So you guys can email me at jaybefaunt@gmail.com. So thank you so very much for that. While we're at it, we're going to say a blanket hello to everybody that's watching here on YouTube and Twitter. Unfortunately, I've ran into some stuff with StreamYard, and so I won't be able to stream to my Twitch. I'm sorry, to my Rumble today, but unfortunately, it hasn't got back in time in order to fix that issue. So I'm streaming from a different account. But with that being said, what are we talking about today? Okay, it's good to see you. Let's get into this. So we're going to be discussing 3 topics. So later in the show today, we're actually going to be talking about education, Orange County Public Schools. Orange County Public Schools, which is basically the county that I live in, is losing students, and why is going to be a very fascinating reason as to why. And trust and believe, it is going to have to do with a lot of money. So then we're also going to be discovering, talk about in the middle of the show about America's new normal. Workers are bringing back brown bagging. And what does this mean for our country at large when workers are now bringing their lunch back? So we're going to be talking about that. But first, we're going to be talking about, is North Korea democratic? We want to talk about some of the things that they do for their people as compared to what the U.S. does for its people here. And so we're going to be doing that. We're going to start off with this. What does North Korea have that we don't have? And I have a special guest that's going to be joining me. Their name is Julia. Thank you so very much for joining the show. Nice to have you. It's a privilege.
Thank you so much. I've never actually done one of these before, so any chance I get to talk about the DPRK or North Korea is obviously really fun. So thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, I discovered you on Twitter, and you were talking about some facts regarding DPRK. And I think the one thing that is on everybody's mind now, I had on Jae Park a few months back talking about some facts about North Korea as well. DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of facts that were there, but to weave through that misinformation, disinformation, the first question I want to ask is DPRK democratic? Because there are people who are responding, even in my tweets, that are saying, it's not, it's repressive and blah, blah, blah. Can you give me just a quick rundown of the democratic process in DPRK?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what we mean by democracy, right? So it's supposed to be this system in which, everyone has a voice, everyone can participate in the democratic process, right? Mm-hmm. But that, isn't really the case in the US, because there's all of these initiatives that are taken to stop people from voting, ID laws, et cetera, mailing like voter registration lists, the fact that voting is not on a holiday So people have to take time off work to do that, which automatically excludes the poorest in America. The DPRK is actually, there's multiple levels of collaboration. So I would call it not, I would say it's not really like an adversarial system. It's not really a system where you're trying to win and beat the other guy so that you can grab more power. It's very much a collaborative system. So there's politics at like the town level, which is your direct community. And you can get involved in that if you want. And then there's politics at the city, and then the largest body in the DPRK is the workers. Well, the Supreme People's Assembly. So that is where all the major decisions will be made about the DPRK. So a lot of people talk about like the Kim family, right? They're the most common accusation that gets leveled is usually just that the Kim family, it's a monarchy, right? It's a hereditary monarchy, and they say that that they're president forever, right? Like supreme leader forever. I think it really depends on so Kim Jong-un doesn't have supreme executive authority over Korean politics. He doesn't even have a veto. His power is actually just one single vote. So he has the same amount of power as anyone else in Korea. And then there are delegates that are sent from each of the regions of Korea to make sure that the needs of different parts of the country are looked after. And then those are brought to the Supreme People's Assembly. The other thing is that there's a misconception that there's only one party in Korea, right? The Workers' Party of Korea, which isn't the case. There's actually 3 official parties, and then there's different trade unions. There's there's an association of Korean women, specifically for women's issues and things like that. So yeah, I mean it. So I think a lot of the time people think that the only way a democracy can be a democracy is based on if it's completely a copy of the US system, right? So they'll say something like, oh, they only have one party. There's I forgot who it was that said it, but I believe he was an African leader. He said something like, America only has one party, but because of American decadence, they have 2 of them, right? So basically saying that the Republicans and the Democrats, they do the same things. They might say that they are different, right? But realistically, they have many of the same policies. They don't serve the people. So having only a few parties in a country in which the entire political apparatus is made to serve the people is a completely different thing than having, only 2 center-right parties as you do in America. Yeah, I mean, if you read the language of their constitution and their newspaper articles, the language is all about service, right? And so you call the Kim Jong-un is called the supreme leader, and he's the supreme leader of the Supreme People's Assembly, which means that he exists to serve the people. So the only body, the highest authority in the DPRK government is actually that, which is supposed to be an aggregate of the people's will.
Okay, and you said it was more of a collaborative. So because one thing that we have here in the United States, and it's pretty undeniable, is the fact that we have brought competition into our political process instead of collaboration. It's red versus blue. You know, it's the footballification, if I can make a new word, of this political system. And so really there's winners and losers. But the thing is, like, if there's winners and losers, that means that there's some of the people win and some of the people lose, when in reality it should be all the people that win and none of the people that lose.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think it's important that we start to look at governments like DPRK and say, okay, so the Kim family that has been, been the principal representatives of DPRK for as long as they have. A lot of people will say to them that's a dynasty. But I also question, for instance, the dynasty of the Roosevelts.
Yes, absolutely. There are political dynasties in America as well, right? The Kennedys. Yeah. And to pretend that there aren't, to pretend that, you know, the cream always rises to the top in American politics is just false, right? It's demonstrably false. There are certain families in that country that cultivate, you know, they have the Ivy League connections, they have the internship opportunities. You can go clerk for a Supreme Court justice if you want, like if you're connected like that. That's also not really the case in the DPRK. So if you're someone that is really interested in politics, you can become a representative. You can become a politician if that's something that you're interested in, but you're not going to get rich from being a politician. You're not going to get these kinds of like, you know, the APAC donations, the lobbying groups. That doesn't exist. So basically, I would say that it's probably easier to become a delegate in the Workers' Party of Korea than it would be to become a delegate in America. Like I don't think that's an extreme thing to say. That you have free education, first of all, like guaranteed education up to grade 12, and then you have, you know, education beyond that vocationally if that's what you want to pursue, and you can change your education. So if you want to divert your path, all you need to do is just you sign up for that program, you pass, you know, whatever training they have for you. So I would say that you know, we talk about like the levers of power, right? The people in the DPRK, the average people in the DPRK have more access to the levers of power than Americans do. Something like 11% of that whole population is a member of a political party, but it's not just like, oh, you have a name, you're a card carrying member of the Democratic Party. You have to go to all the meetings. You have to, you know, attend the votes. You know, you have to do the work. And it's hard work. So the people who end up being recommended for political office are the ones who like have a long track record of supporting the people, working for the people, community leaders, organizers, people who kind of inspire others, right? And yeah, I mean, to talk about the Kim family, every time I talk about the Kim family, I find it hard to contextualize for Americans because I'm always reminded of that. I think it was the Ayatollah of Iran or something. He said something like, you know, you killed Soleimani. there is no American person that we could kill that would have the same impact, because all of your heroes are fictional.
Yeah.
Like, your heroes are Spider-Man and SpongeBob, right? So
Yeah.
it was a great burn. It was like my favorite comeback in the history of all time. So it's basically like that. It's hard to kind of underestimate or to state how important the Kim family is to the foundation and the identity of Koreans. It's not that they have their portraits up because they are forced to, right? They have their portraits up because they love them, because this is actually the person who led them out of what we call bondage, right? Out of occupation. Kim Il Sung is like, if like Nat Turner's revolution succeeded, and then he built an entire socialist state apparatus. That is like the level of dedication, and that's like the cachet that he had as a leader, right? So the first person in that family to become prominent was the GOAT. Like, I love telling people about him, because if it were a movie, people would also love him. Like, if they made a limited series about his life, he was a anti Japanese guerrilla, who,
Oh, wow.
yeah, he fought for Korea and Koreans for 20, 30 decades. And I'm talking about mountain warfare. They're freezing in the mountains of Manchuria, and they're crossing the border into occupied Korea to do raids. He was such a like threat to them that the Japanese had like special units, and their entire mission was kill that guy, right? Like, that's why you exist, to kill that guy. And they couldn't do it. They like all of those squads, hit squads, failed to kill him. Similar to Castro, right? He became a legend, right? As a guerrilla leader, as a military leader, he proved that he was worthy of that job. So he had a lot of, so when Korea as a state was founded, he did have a lot of power. He had he was head of the military. He had power over the executive. He was also, I believe the title was president. And that what he did at the like near the end of his life was he gave up all, like, pretty much all of his executive powers, and they abolished the term president. Like, that office doesn't exist anymore. So they Americans twist it. They say things like, oh, he's like the eternal leader, eternal president, Kim Il Sung. He's eternal because he like that he was the last one, and he will be the last president of that country until the end of time. That's why he's eternal. It's not because they worship them as a god. It's not because it's just lip service. They genuinely actually love these people, and that legacy has carried on to the third generation of Kim Jong-un, because I mean, people in like politicians in North Korea, in the DPRK, are like, you can recall them at any point. So if they didn't want him to be the leader, or like let's say the figurehead, he would not be the leader. Like, there's no Kim family is going to manipulate the votes to make sure that they stay in power. If the Kim family is elected, like every sorry, not the Kim family, Kim Jong-un is elected as head every 5 years. And he has been elected this entire time that he was serving as the chairman.
Okay. So do you think there's, because of what you said about Kim Il-sung,
Yeah.
do you think that there's a lot of pressure on Kim Jong-un to live up to his grandfather's legacy and being in service to the people? Because I think about, like, for instance, another dynasty, which is the Bushes here in the United States, right? You know, and they build up power. First, you start off with Prescott Bush. Then Prescott Bush had his son, George H.W. Bush, and then he had George W. Bush. And then also governor of Florida at one time was Jeb Bush. So you had a lot of that political dynasty that, you know, happens here in the United States. But I wonder about the pressures that are felt by Kim Jong-un. And I think he has a sister as well that's also serving in the government as well. So I wonder if between him and her, there's this weight of the, you know, of the love for his father and grandfather. And it's like, can I live up to that?
Probably. I mean, yeah, personally, as a human being, I bet there always is, right? Like when your father is such an accomplished, basically a hero, right? I call Kim Il-sung the greatest Korean that Korea ever produced. There are other contenders, but in terms of the modern age, I would say that he is the best, because he is the only reason why there are any Koreans who live outside of US hegemony. That's due to him, pretty much. So when it comes to like his successors, I don't really know if he feels like it wouldn't be like a king where you think, oh well, this is my legacy, I have to, you know, do this, and this because my father won this battle, etc. Because it's the legacy of the people, right? Like what is emphasized in all of their publications, in their art, their movies, their music, is that, you know, Pyongyang is the city that the workers built, right? So no matter what happens from here on out, you know, if mistakes are made, we're still collectively building a strong and you know, secure state for Koreans.
So it reminds me, first about Kim Il-sung is how the people felt about Fidel Castro.
Yes.
And also how they say the revolution continues, even though they hold power, even though it is a worker-controlled state. How to them the revolution never stopped.
Yes.
And of course, a lot of times people, you know, talk about how it's very secluded from the rest of the world, but that seclusion, from what I've observed, especially living in the belly of the beast in the West, that seclusion is not created by the DPRK. That seclusion was actually created by the West in order to isolate the DPRK so that they can't have more of a sway in the world and how it views the DPRK and how, you know, the ideas of socialist, a socialist state can go across the world. And it seems like it's more of trying to lock someone into a room instead of a person locking themselves into a room. There's a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I don't remember which Bush it was, but I think it was the son. He called North Korea part of the axis of evil or something like that. Like that was the rhetoric that he used. And if you think about it, it's like, what countries has North Korea colonized. They have never had any colonies. They have not. Korea in general is a bit of a special animal in terms of history and geopolitics, because we didn't want to expand and like have all these different colonies. We just wanted to be left alone on our peninsula to live without other people coming in, right? It's if you look at the history of Korea, the history of Korea is like just all these bigger powers kind of coming in and just juggling with Korea, to usually to its detriment, right? So like the Mongols invaded. For a while, we were a vassal state to China. Japan famously occupied, set up a full like Israel style occupation. So that comes around, and they think the Japanese leave, and they're like, okay, cool. So we finally get to have our own government. All we want is Koreans to govern over Korea. And they were genuinely not allowed to do that. So it was the Korean War was a war of regime change. Well, they tried, but they did not succeed, right? But that's what it was. So yeah, I mean, there's always talk in the media about like Korea's aggression, and Korea is like they're warmongering. Because they are militarized, and they spend a lot of their GDP on the military, which America also does.
Wait, hold on, but isn't that the chamber pot calling the toilet white for the United States?
Yeah.
They're militarized. I'm like, wait, baby, the corn comes from inside the house. First of all, second of all, when it comes to Korea, especially DPRK, like, look what you did during the Korean War. Look what you did to them. So of course they're going to be on the defensive. Yeah. And on top of that, they literally watched, because Koreans ain't stupid. Okay, they watched how the United States dealt with Libya.
Yes, absolutely. And yep.
Wasn't it? I'm blanking on his name, but he was head of the CIA, and he said that what he wants to do to DPRK is the Libya model. And this is why DPRK was like, okay, we're going to have a nuke.
100%.
Because you can't mess with us if we have one.
Yes.
And I know people, there are certain people who are anti-war activists, like, for instance, Scott Ritter, who says that, we have to, nuclear disarm. But here's the thing. And I liken to this analogy. You have a bully in the yard, and the bully has the biggest stick in the yard. But then all the other kids pick up a stick too, and they're like, we got sticks too. Come at me if you want to. The person who has that stick, that's the bully in the yard, has to put their stick down first so that it disarms everybody else. And they go, okay, he doesn't have the stick. Okay, we'll put ours down. Because the oppressor has to put down their tool of mass destruction first before any other state does so. Because who's to say they're going to say, I'm going to put it down, and then, see, I got you. It doesn't work that way, especially when you have almost 800 bases around the world. And you're constantly doing regime change. You're constantly got your foot on the necks of other people throughout the world by means of the corporations that run you. And then you are upset that they now have the same weapon that you have. But last time I checked, North Korea never actually used their nukes on the civilian population.
Yes. Yeah. Only one country has ever done that, right? Yeah. And they're the ones that want to talk about human rights abuses and, warmongering, right? I also think a lot of people don't aren't aware of this, but the U.S. is always doing what they call war games, which is what they call it, but what it actually means is they take a bunch of their tanks and their soldiers and they line them up around the border and they do firing exercises and whatever it is militaries are doing. And there was never a peace in the Korean War. Like the Korean War ended with a ceasefire, but not a complete peace. So technically, this is still someone that you're at war with, or a country that you're still at war with, amassing soldiers around your border. And they're there more days of the week than they're not there. So I think it's something like 260 something days of the year. There are like joint ROK US troops around the border. So you think about, they spend so much money on their GDP. They're so militarized. They have conscription, all of this stuff, but they don't want to have that. This is not something that they just decided, like, we want to have a giant military because we want to, export our power to other countries overseas. They have to spend so much money, so much percentage of their GDP on the military because of America, because of these games, the so-called games, right? So at every moment, they are forced to act as if there will be an attack, right? Because that would just be the perfect sort of ruse, right? You just say, oh, it's just our annual war games. We do this every year, and then that could be the time that they decide to attack. They have no way of knowing that. And they are not going to trust the US because the US are basically like the equivalent of Nazi Germany to Koreans, right? So when America calls Korea evil, the evil thing they did was not say, okay, you guys can rule over us, right? That's what they did. They exercised their sovereignty. And when Korea says that the US is evil and that this is our enemy, there's a laundry list of massacres, atrocities. This was only like 2 generations back. So it's like within living memory, right? Yeah. So it's like, if Nazi Germany won and then turned around and manufactured all of this false information about a population that it genocided. That's essentially what's happening here, if we're drawing the parallel.
Yeah, as far as parallel is concerned, what the United States is doing to the DPRK is equivalent of a rich white person going, "Oh my God, they're doing reverse racism," and I'm just like, "Wait a minute, hold up." Are you being held back? As far as your employment opportunities, are you being held back by redlining? Are you being held by black codes? Mass incarceration, medical experimentation, all these different things that the Black population in the United States have historically been through. How are you being held back systemically from being having upward mobility and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like they really can't combat that. But if you ask people like me, like, how has it had? I got a laundry list of reasons as to why. Yeah. As to why, this system is white supremacist and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so it feels like every accusation is a confession. Right? Yeah. Yeah. That's what, because look, let's be real. Israel is basically just a United States outpost.
Yes.
So they're doing what they're doing to the Palestinians
Mm-hmm.
and the Lebanese and the Yemenis and the Iranians
Mm-hmm.
is basically they're saying, "Oh my God, they hate us for our freedoms." When in reality,
Yeah,
you're
I
the
mean,
one that's literally
freedom.
bombing them. You're
Yes.
the one that's literally doing all this stuff. It's crazy.
The
And
war games
I
that I
actually,
was referencing,
yeah.
the war games are called Operation Freedom Shield.
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I have a family member that fought in the Korean War,
Mm.
and it stinks because now that I know that it was really just about regime change, and the regime change is really to draw out the resources from the land and to you even subjugate the people as a resource for your corporate power. It makes me angry that they use my grandfather
Yes.
in such a way, making it think that we were fighting for freedom. Meanwhile, after the Korean War, when he got back, he was still treated as a second or really a third class citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, during the Korean War, the Korean People's Army dropped leaflets down to like where they thought American soldiers would be. And the leaflets were basically saying, like, we're not your enemy, like to black soldiers, right? Is that we have the same enemy, actually. The same people who keep your people as an underclass within your country are the ones that want to turn this into an underclass colony in which they can extract the resources that they want and then just discard as necessary, right? This is a colonial playbook, and it's very common. It's done almost every single time. There's like all of these things where we see in Palestine right now is familiar because we're watching this happen in real time. But yeah, the people of and American sort of think tanks will lie about Korea, and they'll say stuff like North Korea is racist. North Koreans believe that they're racially superior to other people. But if you examine this claim closely, it falls apart because of what they've done, because of the way that they welcomed Black Panther Party members to the DPRK. When I don't know a lot about his later life, but Eldridge Cleaver, he when he was I believe he was in exile from America because there was something, he was under investigation for something. He and his wife left to live in North Korea, and their daughter was born there, and they gave their daughter a Korean name.
Wow.
Yeah, their daughter. I don't remember what the name is. I'm sure someone in chat knows it, but yeah. And so and while his wife was there, she received free delivery, free maternity care, etc. She didn't pay anything for it. And that's the kind of, I guess, the standard, and they prove it with their actions, right? They prove that they care about Palestinians because they provide aid. They proved that they cared about the Algerians for the exact same reason. And yeah, they welcomed several Black Panther Party members and other Black radicals to Pyongyang.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because of Western hegemonic power, to get excuse me, to get to the DPRK is, it's kind of like having to go around the world just across the street in that way.
I know. Yeah, I know what you mean.
They make it so that it's extremely difficult to get there. And my question is, if the DPRK is so bad, then why not let Americans go there freely so they can see how bad it is, so that when they come back, they go, "Ha ha! Thank God I live here in the United States."
Absolutely. I mean, and what they do is then they because they can't do that, right? Because if people went to the DPRK, they would just see a normal country, right? So they have to manufacture these stories about how like cameras aren't allowed, you can't take pictures, there's no cell phones, and like a guide walks you around like the entire time they watch you, etc.
Yeah.
But like again, this is a country that they're still technically at war with, and these are citizens of a country that they still are at war with. So if they are like watching them while they wander around Pyongyang, I don't really see the problem with that, right? Like I don't. It's people do go to the DPRK, and I know people who have known people who've done their doctorate at like Kim Il Sung University. So yeah, like they welcome foreigners. It's just they they don't really have diplomatic relations with a lot of places, right? Like they don't have trade relations with a lot of places. Yeah, I always just tell people like just you don't have to listen to me, like whatever. Just go on Xiaohongshu or Red Note and just search for the Korean word for Korea, right? What they call it, Chosun. Or even just search the emoji in the app, and you'll see videos from people who live in North Korea who like are just filming their daily lives.
Wow.
But yeah, it's readily available, and there are like Chinese exchange students there. People from North Korea vacation in China and Russia. Like they're given like I think it's like 2 weeks off minimum per year. And if they want to, they can go to China, or they can go to like any number of countries that isn't actively embargoing them, isn't actively hostile against them. So this idea that it's somehow like a shithole because you don't have access, you as an American, you're not able to talk to a North Korean. It's like they don't want to talk to you. I'm sorry, like most of you hate them. Like not you, obviously, but like most Americans like believe pretty much everything about
But here's the thing. The Americans that actually hate North Korea, they receive the hate based on hearsay. I'll give you an example. You have a mother and a father, and it doesn't work out between the mom and the dad. And so, the dad ends up having to leave. And the mom will start talking to her kids and talking bad on the father. And as they're talking bad about the father, the kids develop this idea of their father in their head, and they immediately start to hate him. But then they grow up and then they find out, oh, well, I've been trying to get custody of you guys, and I've been trying my best to be in your life, but your mother just wouldn't let me. Or I tried to come around, and every single time I did, your mother would push me away. So, and I wanted to be there, but I couldn't. And so they had this skewed idea to hate that person, when in reality it was because the mother was bad mouthing the father. And so they didn't know that he was an upstanding guy that it just didn't work out between them, but he still wanted to be there for his kids. And it's the same thing with the United States in regards to DPRK.
Absolutely.
Is that constantly being told, oh, DPRK is like this, DPRK is like that. And which also brings me to this tweet that was
oh my God, yes.
This person, I don't know who this person is, but
nobody knows. He's
Yeah.
he's a creator of Epic Mealtime, which I don't think has been relevant since the
Yeah.
early 2000s.
Yeah.
So
So, I'm sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I just, this is, I look at stuff like this and I want to reply to it. And this in particular, I wanted to do kind of like a deep dive response to it, but
Mhm.
I was like too tired to break it up into like, the perfect tweet thread or whatever. So sometimes because this is something that America and other propagandist countries do, right? It's the fire hose of disinformation, right?
Mhm.
Where it's like they lie and you're gathering up the resources to debunk their lie, but they're already moved on to the next lie. And they
Mhm.
just, it's another and another and another
Mhm.
constantly. Which is by design to exhaust you, right? Because it's harder to fact check individual things than it is to just spew BS, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. The DPRK is recognized by the world. Okay, well, first of all, who's the world, right? Like, the world means the West, right? And their allies. That's that's the way it always is. It's like the US,
Mhm.
UK, France,
Mhm.
etc., etc. That's
Yeah.
what the world means. Repressive. See, the other thing about these kinds of tweets are that they're vague and they never define their definitions, right?
Mhm.
Because that way they can move the goalposts.
Mhm.
So repression and human rights. North Korea is one of the worst on the planet. It's not beautiful, and it's definitely a horrible dictatorship. No freedom of speech, press, or political opposition. Okay, so I think it is beautiful, actually, and I think the original tweet that this is responding to is correct. It's a beautiful socialist country. Um, and what do we mean by beautiful? It's not like these like extremely expensive looking buildings everywhere. It's clean streets where their buildings are appropriately maintained. It's public art that exists to be aesthetically pleasing so that people can look at it. There's public
Mhm.
art everywhere in the DPRK.
Yeah.
um and no ads, right? Like you'll never see like a billboard being like, "Oh, buy this brand." That doesn't exist. It's on this day the workers achieved this, like they built this factory or something, and it's like a painting of the workers, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, repression and like political opposition, like I said, is built into the system of governance of the DPRK, right? As in, you are allowed to form another political party if you want to. Um,
Mhm.
it, it's just that, like, when they vote in the assembly, that's not them actually fighting it out. Like in that chamber, they're just confirming so they'll look at a bill and they'll say, okay, so all of these committees signed off on this. Does anyone here have any concerns? You each get one vote. It's majority vote, and that's how it's passed, right? So it's not like you can't have an opinion that is against the state. Like yeah, I mean, and human rights is always it's a very interesting accusation
Mhm.
to me, at least, because I never know what they mean. Like our freedom, our rights, whatever. Because people in the DPRK, they constitutionally have the right to housing, to food, to clean water, to education. These are all like enshrined as the very basic human rights that the state has to provide to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the United States just, it doesn't even have freedom of speech, right? Like you were right when you said every accusation is a confession. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they disappear people in North Korea for criticizing the state. Well, they just did that to several international students, right? Like that is something that they do. Or they talk about elites and they say, oh, only the elite people can live in Pyongyang, or a couple of families like rule over everything, which is also America. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's also South Korea, right? Like the family that owns Samsung
Mm-hmm.
is like a shadow government, basically. So I mean, yeah, there are, it's not unlimited freedom. Like, you don't have the right to um steal all the water in California like
Mm-hmm.
the freaking Resnicks did, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've, yeah, they're actually, it's actually insane to me how they've been able to get away with stealing like most of California's water.
Mm-hmm.
That would never happen in the DPRK, right? Like, you don't have freedom to make profits that never end, right?
Yeah.
Or to pollute the environment, right? This like, I know you've seen some of the videos where they show like the countryside of the DPRK, and it's all green and it's like, you know, it's beautiful. There's like a lot of beautiful nature around, and that's on by design, right? Like they have planned their goal, like they have goals for the next 5 years, right now they're doing like a big push to kind of build more homes within like the rural areas. That's like one of the big focuses. Yes, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
thank you. This is perfect. Yeah, and you know, people see this and they're like, oh well, these are probably empty, which I don't know why you would bother to do that. To build a house and let it sit empty. It's not like in capitalist societies where you have like a housing market. Like there's no housing market where people can be priced out of housing, and they houses sit empty
Mm-hmm.
with nobody in them, and then people are sleeping on the streets. That like homelessness just is not a concept that
Mm-hmm.
exists to the people of the DPRK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually talked to Jayyum Park about that, as far as um, about the housing situation, where really they don't have homelessness.
They don't.
And it's one thing. It's kind of interesting when people talk about housing, and when you look at the streets of DPRK,
Mhm.
whether they be rural or they be urban, I don't see one bit of trash. And people say, well, that's selective. You only see, you know, the nice parts. And it's like, okay, well, I haven't seen anything from anyone who has defected from North Korea,
Mhm.
any video of anything that looked dilapidated, that looked unkept
Mhm.
at all.
Yeah.
I haven't seen
Because
any video.
the people that are, whose job it is to clean the streets and to maintain the parks and the buildings, they are respected. They are, you know, paid well. I'm pretty sure like some of the highest paying jobs in the DPRK are teachers, right? So if you, and they have all these, they have like a ridiculous amount of medals and like awards and commemorations for not just military things, but for everything. So if you're a dedicated street sweeper who has served, you know, the people for like 20 years, you're rewarded for that service.
Mm,
You're, you know, you get raises, you get certain perks to say thank you, basically.
mhm,
So yeah, I mean, I think there's no incentive to clean up parts of like a city. Like I live in Toronto, so I wouldn't just go and like start picking up trash on the middle of the street because there's no incentive, right? Like I have no connection to that street. Um, but in the DPRK, it's like, no, this is actually our road. This is our neighborhood. So we want to make sure that it is beautiful. And also that, you know, people not only people don't just deserve housing, they deserve good housing, right? They deserve a certain level of housing, right? I mean, I mentioned to you privately that like I was trained and worked as a social worker in Canada here. And honestly, it's not really housing if you're living with bed bugs for like 10 years. You know what I mean? Like that is not like we should not be asking people to put up with this just because they're poor or just because they're disabled and they can't work, right? It's honestly it's ludicrous. Some of the, I mean, it does get me kind of angry, and then I'm just like, okay, I understand it's not your fault because the US government requires you to hate these people who've actually never done anything wrong to you, who actually don't even hate you as like an individual American, because every single time there's like a huge like police brutality scandal in the United States, like the Michael Brown case, the DPRK will release like their news media talks about it, and they talk about how you know, American police are murderers, and you know the killing of Mike Brown was unjustified. When George Floyd was murdered, they talked about that extensively. So yeah, I think the average person in North Korea, I would say probably is far better educated politically than the average American, by design, and B, like they're far more empathetic to the plight of the average, you know, homeless American, than other people in the same country.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I this thing like the idea of solidarity is something that, you know, Korea is really, they do well, right? It's like we will support you because you're an underclass, because you're oppressed, regardless of what like basically it costs us. So if we're going by good guys and bad guys and human rights abuses and all of this stuff, it's like, well, human rights, but like it's not apparently a right to not be homeless in America, right? Human rights, but you're told you don't deserve food to eat.
Yeah, they actually tried to put that in the, I think it was the UN human rights,
Yes.
where they tried to put in that food is a human right.
Mhm.
And the only two countries that actually voted against putting that as a human right were United States and Israel.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Exactly. And they're the ones who want to tell the rest of the world about these evil Koreans, right? Like they're a threat to us and they're a threat to our way of life. It's like, no, actually, it's the opposite. You're the threat to their way of life because all they want is to be left alone and for you to get out of their neighborhood and to stop threatening them basically by showing off your guns and your new missiles, and just get out. Like they want it's an indigenous success story, right? Like these are Koreans are the indigenous people of that peninsula, and they want to have self-governance, right?
Yeah.
They want sovereignty, and that should be okay. But a lot of the times we see that it actually isn't okay if you have, you know, if you have melanin in your skin, right? Like you,
Basically.
right? Like these are demands that if the US, if a white country did these things, they'd be like, this is very reasonable, actually. So yeah, that's generally what I have to say about that tweet. To me, freedom comes from freedom, like, to be a person and think, and have ideas and thoughts that aren't based on and directly tied to your ability to eat, your ability to survive, your ability to, all of those things are taken care of for you at the baseline minimum. And so people have the ability to pursue what it is they want.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know we're just short on time, but one of the things, there's one question. You have time for one more question?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry. I honestly, half the time I talk to people about the DPRK, and it's just like automatically like a slur, or it's just like, oh, you're brainwashed. Oh, like blah, blah, blah. You get paid by the Korean government to spread this stuff. And it's like, they don't have the money to do that stuff, guys. Like, they are fighting to build their own state. They don't care what you guys think about them.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
honestly, like all the crazy stories and stuff, it's like they don't give a damn. So yeah, it's just, anyway, I digress. What was the last question?
Well, okay, so there was I can't find a tweet for some reason, but somebody said something to the effect of getting free beer in the DPRK.
That was
clear this up to me, because I'm actually quite curious. Are they literally giving to their citizens free beer in DPRK?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are giving. It's I think it's about 5 liter. Is it 5 or 8 liters of beer every month? Free beer. Yes. So every person gets I think it's like 30 pounds of food or something a month, regardless of whether or not you're working. Right? Yeah. I know. And the beer.
Where's my plane ticket at?
The beer is like, it's apparently pretty good. It's like microbrew. Like, they have like a whole like beer bro culture in North Korea. There's like different breweries, and people really love beer. They love beer, and they get it for free from the government, but then also you can just buy it with like whatever you earn at your job, and it's free. Like, it's not free, sorry, it's affordable. I know. It's so funny because as soon as I said that, Americans were like, hold up, wait a second.
What kind of sorcery is this?
Yeah, and it's funny because like I saw a Daily Mail article that said something like North Koreans get 6 liters of free beer a month, but they have to wear a pin that praises Kim Jong-un to get it. It's like, no. Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not a beer drinker. I really don't like the taste of alcohol like that. But if I did, I would wear a pin. Man, give me that pin. I'll wear it everywhere.
Exactly. Honestly.
And
there's also weed. There's weed.
Huh?
There's weed.
Okay, so I actually had a question about that.
Yeah.
Because I heard that recreational marijuana is not illegal, but it's also not, like legalized.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, okay, it's a thing, do it if you want, do it if you don't want. And it's kind of like, it's not necessarily taboo.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it is taboo in a lot of throughout a lot of Asia, right? Like, and there are historical reasons for that. And it's funny. It's so funny because like reporting on this is so weird, because you'll have Vice being like, North Korea is a stoner's paradise. And then you'll have Radio Free Asia being like, oh, well, in North Korea, you get executed for having like a dime bag, right? Neither is true. It's basically like it's not really any of their business. But I also think there's a difference, for example, between like the things that a country will just admit to, like that, oh yeah, our citizens can just smoke whatever whenever they want, or and actually like enforcing any kind of like law against it. So it grows in people's backyards. It grows in like wild, on like naturally on the street. You can pick it if you want. It's not going to be like, I know, okay, but one caveat is that it's not going to be like diesel Kush 2000 99% like THC rate that'll melt your face off. Like, that's not what it is, unfortunately, because those are like capitalists who have an incentive to create the strongest breeds, and that's what they're doing. It's not cultivated, but you can grow it in your garden. No one's gonna come around to be like, hey, do you have weed in your garden? And I can honestly pretty much guarantee you that people are not in jail for it, right? Like,
so because things like drug possession, really, for the most part, it's what we like to call a victimless crime.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of doing it to yourself, and so how can it be a crime if you're doing it to yourself, right? And so I'm trying to be careful with how I present it, but if I want to smoke hookah, right? Who am I harming?
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it seems like to me that the DPRK, the government of DPRK, is like, why are we going to legislate what people do for themselves?
Right?
We're focused
absolutely.
on, the material conditions of our workers and how that affects other people. But if it's something that just affects you and you alone, and that's a personal decision, which also makes me wonder about the view, because I'm part of the LGBTQ community. It's like, well, if you have a relationship, or if you're, with somebody of the same gender or what have you, it's like, what is it my business? You know what I mean?
It isn't. And I like, people will try to pull things from like various government whatevers and twist the words, but the reality is that that there's always a reason for repression, right? So like in terms of drugs, what it was it was profitable to criminalize certain demographics of people for using certain drugs, right? So that's why laws for different substances are different in America. And the state is also making money off of your incarceration. It's making money off of all of these systems, so they have an incentive to restrict your freedom solely because of that. In the DPRK, they don't care, because as long as you're not harming other people, as long as you're not completely destroying yourself, you have like a lot of personal freedom. And I would say also that like a lot of the times people who are doing drugs are doing it because there's, like, myself included, we're doing it because capitalism is really messed up, and it creates conditions like loneliness and isolation that don't have a parallel in the DPRK, right? That's community. They have real community, and we don't have that because it's not profitable for our societies to be laid out that way.
Yeah, and I say this quite often. Trauma is a gateway drug.
Mm. Hmm.
And so because of that, we self-medicate in order to get through the pain that is inflicted upon us. And a lot of that pain is caused because the things that we need in order to thrive are gate kept or they are paywalled.
Yes.
And so therefore we don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to self-medicate in order to be able to escape. But if you have all your material conditions met, and if you have a sense of community, the need for that self-medication goes away. Or if anything, it's only used on a recreational basis just to let loose a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Koreans love to party. we love a good party. We love to have, a drink.
Oh, do you now?
Yes.
Okay.
Korean barbecues, we're kind of, people get loud. They get the Asian glow. They start
Tell me, I need to get my passport.
Seriously,
I need to go.
Yeah, and people ask me that all the time. They're like, "Well, why don't you go live there?" I'm like, "Are you gonna pay for my ticket? Because I will. Like right now, I'm broke. Like I can't afford to go. Like I can't afford to do all these different, to apply for citizenship. I can't afford to fly to, Pyongyang. But I would live there. I would. So I get accused of being like someone who like thinks that North Korea is a utopia, right?
Yeah.
Like people are like, oh, you think that they're, it's perfect over there, it's a paradise, which was also the rhetoric that we saw on that post, right? It's like a beautiful paradise. I believe that, but I believe that because it's a society that's ordered in a way that you have maximum power and dignity as an individual, right? It's a society where you actually matter, and that people, if you drop dead on the street, would help you, would care for you. It's and everything that they do in that country, despite the hardships and the lack of, for a while, Korea didn't have consistent electricity. They didn't always have the most nutritious food.
Yeah.
But there's always this idea that what you're working for will go back to your own community and back to the people. So if you work hard, all you're doing is helping your community grow and thrive. It's not being put into the pockets of someone who already has way too much money so that they can make more money. I mean, yeah, I would rather live in a country that's poor, like admittedly not a great, GDP, that has that kind of attitude than the richest country in the world where there's no safety net, there's no, room for mistakes, there's no, you're stuck on a path, and that's more than likely the path that you're going to be on for like the rest of your life. Right?
Wow. Look, I want this conversation to last longer, but
I know you have, for sure, you got a lot, but I mean, I'm part of a streaming group. They're in the chat. We're called Juche Gang, and it's just people who talk about North Korea and love it. Every Tuesday we watch a film from like a North Korean film, so people can see like what kind of shows they have, etc. Stream and chat with me or on Twitter, whatever. But yeah, I always want to talk about Korea, and it's nice to have someone that doesn't immediately be like, well, you're smoking crack, which someone said to me under one of my posts, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, of course. I'm keenly interested, and in fact, I want to know what isn't the State Department telling us? What isn't the United States government telling us?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times they'll say, well, this government's like this and this government's like that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You guys were the ones that helped overthrow Mohammed Mossadegh.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You guys were the ones that overthrew oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name. Salvador Allende.
Mm-hmm.
And installed a dictator named Augusto Pinochet.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You guys are the same ones that have been upholding people like William Ruto.
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys had Kwame Nkrumah, and you guys had Muammar Gaddafi murdered.
Yes.
Thomas Sankara. So please don't come to me and tell me who my enemy is.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense, because the thing is if you're oppressing me within your borders,
yes, 100%.
Then why in the fuck should I listen to you about who my enemy is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because look, I'm gonna tell you right now, China didn't give us Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why we have homelessness isn't because of DPRK.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why we don't have healthcare for everybody isn't because of Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
Damn sure ain't because of Cuba, because Cuba be sending doctors everywhere.
They're really good at it.
Cuba is the Oprah Winfrey of doctors.
You get a doctor. You get a doctor.
Everybody gets a doctor. The thing is like, why am I going to listen to them when you guys have been in the work of oppressing and not just committing genocide against the Native Americans here,
mm-hmm.
but also the genocide of my people, Black Americans, freedmen here.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the sin of chattel slavery, you guys don't even want to pay for it, even though it's owed us reparations.
Oh, yeah. No, there's a reparation talk with people in Haiti right now are protesting. They're saying that France owes them. It's France owes them triple times over, France owes them literally every dollar they have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things where and you mentioned Sankara. Sankara is one of my favorite socialist
mm-hmm.
leaders. I adore him. Gone too soon, obviously. But he said something like, we can choose to have champagne for the very few, or we can have clean drinking water for everyone, right? We can choose to have this Beverly Hills in America where you can get everything you want on demand, but then also have people lying in the streets and without shelter.
Yeah.
Right. And the sad thing about the American mindset is that they think that it must be fake, or that it has to be there has to be a catch to it, because they don't believe that a good world is possible, because they've been beat down for so long by these elites and these corporations that they can't imagine another world in which the people rule, right? And so I think the last thing I want to say is that there's a Kim Il-sung quote that's also my favorite, where this guy asked him do you believe in God? And he said, the people are my God. I worship the people as my God, because only the masses are omnipotent and should always be obeyed. The masses can never be wrong, right? So,
wow,
the people are my God.
Wow.
It's not, APAC is my God. It's not the Sacklers are my God, right? It's
It's not that money's your God.
Oh yeah, of course. Money is just a means to an end, right?
Of course. Man, Julia, it was an honor. It was a privilege to have you. This conversation has been elevating as well as enlightening. I can't wait to have you back on, because I do want to have you back on to talk about news stories and things like that from your
Yeah,
perspective.
of course. And if you want to talk, homelessness and systemic, issues and things like that, all
Yeah,
the time. Yeah. Thank you.
definitely. All right. Thank you so much, Julia.
Yeah,
And look, I'll be talking to you in the interwebs.
absolutely. Yeah.
All
Take
right.
care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody. That was a great conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was something that I've been wanting to talk about a little bit more, because a lot of times we have these preconceived notions in our head about these different socialist states. And why do I say socialist states, not communist states? Socialism is the vehicle to get to communism, right? It's not this, you have a communist party that may run a state, but the state itself is socialist, where the workers own the means of production, and they also are the ones who have the power within the governmental structure. And so because of that, I think that it is important that we start to shine more light on countries like DPRK, right? I would love to get somebody to come on to talk about Laos, and I would love to get somebody from Cuba to come on and talk about Cuba, talk about Venezuela. So yeah, I would love to get more people to talk about these countries as well, to kind of debunk a lot of the narrative that's happening. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's important that you support independent media, because every single, news and news media, whether it be corporate media or independent media, everybody has a bias. Every single one. The question is, where does that bias lean, right? You have the corporate media. Well, it's in, the name, where they favor corporate power, right? And independent media, a lot of us, me at, Jaybefaunt channel, you have Savvy Sabs, RBN. We lean very heavily on the power of the people to determine and run their lives. And so our opinions are skewed in a way where it's maximizing the amount of power that all the people have, so that everybody gets their material conditions met. And once your material conditions are met, that also influences culture. And that culture can breed more of a communal type of structure, where you actually start to come together more and have more solid relationship between you and your neighbors. And this is one of the things that we're trying to facilitate. And so that's part of our leanings. That's part of my leanings, because I want humans to be the best version of themselves, and they can only do it by having their material conditions met, and then having a culture that reflects that. Okay. That being said, you guys know what to do. Go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much. I appreciate Julia for coming on, being very generous with her time, to talk about this subject. And yes, I have actually talked about North Korea before. Let me share this with you guys too, just so you guys can see. And yes, I have actually had conversation. This is me talking to Jung-hyun Park. We talked about homelessness in North Korea. So, this was, something. Wait, when did I post this? That was in December. Okay. So that was a great conversation as well. So, with that being said, I would like to, just help inform people, because the corporate media always leans against people-powered governments, because corporate media does not want people to be in power. They want the corporate oligarchs and the corporate dictators to be in power, because that's who owns them, right? Remember what Butch Ware said during the 2024 campaign? He said, "Who funds you runs you." Go to my Patreon and see who funds me. All right. With that being said, let's get into the chat. We got a few in here. Let me go in here. So, Street Cat Love says the highest paid job in the DPRK is a teacher. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know if it was said in South Korea or DPRK, but I think they said they call their teachers nation builders. That's really important, to call your teachers nation builders, meaning those are some of the most important jobs in the nation, because you're literally helping to build the future through education. And I honestly don't think that we give teachers enough, both materially as well as culturally, the flowers that they deserve. I just don't think we do. I think we devalue teachers, and I think we need to reverse it, because ultimately, you know, they help us to be able to understand our world. So thank you very much for that. Katie Lewis, who's also part of the Orlando RBN chapter, says, just like how white supremacy had to demonize Black folks at home to justify chattel slavery and Jim Crow, white supremacy has to demonize the East and global South to legitimize itself. And he continues, says, question, oh, I forgot about this. I'm sorry. Question for Julia. How can we challenge DPRK defectors on their descendant or their descendants in the States without negating their experience? Or should their experience complaints with DPRK be disregarded altogether? That's actually a really good question. I wish I've completely forgot. I had started and I forgot, but I did see people responding as well. But as far as the descendants, of course, you know, not everybody in every country absolutely loves exactly what their government does. Look, let's be real. Let's say that the United States suddenly became a socialist state. You know, there's going to be some people that are going to want to push capitalism. They're going to want to push it. And they're going to want to push it even though they're getting free healthcare, they're getting free education, they're getting, and not necessarily free, but it's provided by all the people pooling their resources together so that everybody has their material needs met. But there's going to be people who are still going to defect. The question I have is for the defectors. We live in the age of the smartphone. Why didn't you take pictures before leaving? Why didn't you take some video before leaving? It's just a question, because if you're going to make an accusation, you also need to have evidence to back that up. So yeah, just saying. Roger says, okay, this is the third best interview. Thanks for the education, ma'am, about North Korea. First best was Joey talk about hemp. Yeah, that was a pretty sweet interview. Second was with Santa Claus. You're talking about Keith McHenry, who you still have not put the whole clip of interview up. Yeah, that was an RBN interview, and I would have to download it. I'll get to it I'll get to it sometime, Roger. You got to give me some patience on that. I just got a new kitty, damn it. Chill. I'll get it up. Sean Miller says, smoking a fatty right now. Smoking if it got him high. There we go. All right. We have Buck Forte says, yes, if anyone one anywhere is going to accuse DPRK government of arresting people for anything at all, incarcerating people, you need to provide any kind of actual figures, because we have figures for the US. Yes, we do. Tim says, yes, Sankara is one of my favorites too. He's also part of the Orlando chapter as well. And then Roger says, hey, don't sleep on or neglect what's going on with Burkina Faso and the AES, James, the African version of BRICS, baby. You got to bring on someone from there. I'm going to try. I got to take a quick break. I'll be right back. Whew. All right, so let's continue on with the chat. I wanted to see just a little bit more. So just going to say a couple of hellos and then we shall move on. Unfortunately, due to the sake of time, I can't say hello to everybody, but just to let you guys know. Hey. All right, so we have CBC voter coming in saying happy Tuesday at JB. Good to see you, CBC voter. We have RIP Rafael Alarir says, let's go. Juche Chang. Juche Gang. Thank you. My pronunciation is horrible today. Street Cat Love says, we love Julia. Julia is smart. Brilliant. Glad I brought her on. Wait, hold on. Come on. Hang on. Okay. There we go. Wait, why won't it? Okay. Trying to. Okay, there we go. All right. And then we have Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, Jaybefaunt. Hey, everyone. Good to see you. We have Terry Connolly coming in saying, greetings to JB and comrades. All right, good to see you in here as well. We have Jace Hart coming in saying, good afternoon, all. Nice to have you in here. And we have Juche Gang says, afternoon, Dongmas and comrades in chat. Good to see you here. We have Guilo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Hello, good to see you also in here. Nice to have you. Of course, we got Roger coming in saying, wow. We have Book Forte says exactly. Nice to have you in here as well. We have Spaceman Jay Francis says, read about Juche, y'all. You have nothing to lose from it. We have nothing to lose but our chains, right? We have Neuro Riot saying peace and saying hello. Good to see you. We have Christina coming in saying cool on the Twitter side. All right. We'll do 3 more. Oh, that's a good question. But we talked about that with Jahyung Park a few months ago. So I'm pretty sure he went over that as well. But that's also yes. And Juche Gang says DPRK has free housing for all. So that would definitely help a lot of people here, right? Chris C says, got in a bit late. Dang, good to see you. Anyway, Chris C, better late than never. All right. And then let's do 1 more. I'm just trying to get to somebody who I haven't got to say hello to. And then we have Soul Construct giving waves. Thank you so very much. Now, one of the things that we are going to get into. Oh, CV, thank you. Dongmu is Korean for comrade. Okay. Thank you so very much. I learned a new word today. Got a great community here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the patron shout out first, and then we'll get into our next subject. So just want to give a shout out to all the patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this work. You guys make this possible. Thank you so very much. And yeah, so I just want to show you guys the tiers. Here are the tiers. All right, so patrons, we have Mega JB. I really got to fix this. Oh, it just looks tacky as hell, but I'll take care of it. Mega Jaybefaunters. We have Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters. We have Comrade, Solidarity, and JB members. And also, we would like to welcome new members, Ms. Liz and Shane Rohane. All right. Thank you so very much for joining and also contributing to the channel. It means the most to people like me so that I can be able to continue to help inform and inspire and activate. And also just to let you guys know, my channel is demonetized. So if you like to support the channel, you can support via Patreon or PayPal. So thank you very much. Those links are also in the description down below. So what are we going to be doing further? So we're going to be going further into our next segment here. So stick around. We have talked about is North Korea democratic, and talk about what North Korea is doing for its people as compared to the United States. So we talked about that with Julia. We're going to be going next into America's new normal. This is one that I think we need to discuss. So we're going to be getting into this, especially if you are a worker and you feel like the squeeze is coming on you. So we're going to be getting into American workers' new normal. So we're going to start that right now. So as far as I know, there has been a way that people have said, you know, you save a lot more money if you just brought your lunch to work, which a lot of people, they still do, you know, especially those of us who are lower on the rungs of the economic ladder. But there seems to be a trend of brown bagging it, as we like to call it, going up. And it's quite interesting to see how this is becoming more and more prevalent. What does this mean? What does this point to? So there's this article, and shout out to Roger Meadows for this story because he shared this with me. And so I would like to share this with you. So there's an article here that I want to get into. And it says more people are bringing lunch to work. That's a bad economic indicator. First of all, it is a bad economic indicator. And we're going to look as to why. And it's because there's a recession afoot. Professor Richard Wolff said that in these United States, under the capitalist economic model that we have, is that a recession typically happens every 4 to 7 years. Well, the last recession that we had was in 2020 during the pandemic. It is now 2025, so we're well within the 4 to 7 year marker. We are right on time. And so now it is being reflected in the personal lives of many Americans in this country, where people are bringing their lunch to work. So let's get into this and let's discuss. So look at that. Look, when I was working in the office, or look, when I was working in sales, baby, they look a lot like this. Oh, there's somebody named James in there. Okay, I wonder what he got to eat. He probably got some spaghetti, you know what I'm saying? Because that's how I'll roll. Anyways, it says inside the office fridge, maybe behind a don't touch Post-it note, is a telling economic indicator. More employees are eating lunches brought from home than they have in years. Millions of people have been called back to work in offices, but that's not the massive windfall that restaurants, salad bars, and sandwich spots had hoped for after the COVID-19 pandemic decimated their midday businesses. Many workers are finding picking up lunch is too pricey, and more are schlepping in Tupperware and brown bags than they did a year ago. So one of the things says millions of people have been called back to work in the offices. So let me stop there for a second, because one of the things that actually was interesting, and Roger actually was like, hey, this reminds me of this one part that you actually talked about in one of your earlier streams. And so let me see if I can get it up here. But we talked about people being forced back into the office, right? That was one of the things that we actually had a discussion. And so let me see if I can get this up here. Yes. Okay. So let me see. There's it right there. Let's go there. All right, so I'm gonna play this right quick, and then we'll continue in the article. But as far as making it so that people will return to the office, people were like, well, why are people returning to the office? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's actually more economically viable for people to stay at home and work from home rather than come back to the office. Maybe it's economically viable for workers, but of course, in this capitalist system, if it's good for workers, that means it's not good for the people at the top. So let me share this. And yes, you're going to see me twice on screen, but that's okay. You can use a double dose of JB. But let's get into this. Well, let me show you. Now, this tweet is no longer on Twitter, but I got the screenshot and I just want to share this. So at the height, I remember this tweet got over 250,000 likes because it's true. Let's enlarge. It says casual reminder that a huge reason that they don't want you to work from home anymore is because in terms of capitalism, it makes dozens of skyscrapers and office buildings they built obsolete, impractical, unprofitable, and generally a bad financial investment. Like, seriously, imagine what a city like New York City or LA, Los Angeles, places that are practically designed around a vast quantity of these sort of buildings would look like if everyone who could work from home did. I want you to think about that. Because that's why they want you back in the office. There's a little bit more detail about that. So let me share this video. And so let me get into this. Let me see. I want to make sure. And so, let's get into this. Let me fast forward a little bit to the primary reason. Hang on, let me make sure. All right.
Now, let's get to the real reason. Let me tell y'all, okay, you've waited however many minutes this video is going. Let me tell you the real reason. It's the tax deductions, baby. Y'all know Noelle Randall is a real estate entrepreneur. I absolutely love real estate. Things that have to do with real estate excite me. But one of the reasons why real estate is exciting for so many people is because of the tax deductions. Well, many of these companies have received numerous and big tax deductions for the real estate that they have and having those employees come into those offices. Okay. There's the leases on commercial properties. Think about that. They have those leases and they want to continue to get those leases. That is important for not only the company, but the company, those commercial companies that own that real estate, the property management companies that run that commercial real estate. That's revenue for them. So you get local, county, state, and even federal tax deductions for having a company with employees that are in the office and how many people go to the office. That is super important. And I'm going to actually share with you a real example that I saw with my own two eyes. I was working for a company called Movement Mortgage, and this was, I think, like one of the last jobs that I had where I was gaining my confidence. Like, I'm going to get out of the workforce, but I really wasn't ready. I was still kind of a chicken. And that was really because, just my mindset. I just really wasn't all the way there. This is 2015, 2016. So, but Movement Mortgage was actually based out of Norfolk, Virginia. And so when I first went to work there, we were working in this kind of old office that, was in Norfolk. But guess what? They actually, I'm not even going to get into all of it. It may have even been Virginia Beach, but the city of Norfolk actually gave Movement Mortgage. And again, this is public records. I don't feel like I'm sharing anything, crazy. The city of Norfolk gave them a ton of money to take a rundown JCPenney in the mall, in the Norfolk Mall. And again, you can look this up, for Movement Mortgage to bring all of their operations there from the Virginia Beach office. And it was an amazing office. It was beautiful. They completely renovated an old JCPenney that had went out of business. And we literally worked at the mall. Okay, the mall was like half empty. This is Norfolk, Virginia. And this was, again, Norfolk, Virginia's economic development department. Okay, so there's tons of economic development departments within counties and cities and local governments that are working to bring employers to their area. And they give them really great subsidies. They give them tax benefits. They even sometimes give them outright money, to renovate and things like that. So I'm not.
So with that being said, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that now that they're forcing workers back to work, the money that would go towards going to the local deli, going to local restaurants, things like that, or shopping at your local grocery store, that money's not going to gas. That's good money going to wear and tear on your car, trying to get into the office. That's money going towards maybe paying more for childcare. So the money that's actually could be used at these restaurants or food stops right near the job aren't being used there because it's being taken up by having to travel back into the office, by having to essentially spend that money elsewhere because people just aren't making enough. And when it comes to the inflation, or I like to call corporate price gouging, and now you have a lot of people who are now being forced to brown bag it instead. So that's why it says, but that's not the massive windfall that restaurants, salad bar, and sandwich spots had hoped for after the pandemic decimated their midday business. Because many workers are finding picking up lunch is too pricey and are more schlepping in Tupperware and brown bags than they did a year ago. Basically meaning that because they have to spend that money on gas, on childcare, on wear and tear of their car, all these different things. Also, you got to remember, like, here's an indirect thing that people don't think about, right? If you have to go into the office, that means you got to wear the right attire to go into the office, meaning you're doing more laundry, which means you have to buy more detergent. You got to buy more the dryer sheets, the fabric softener. If you use any of that, you're using more water, you're using more electricity, which means that that's also another variable that takes away from that money that you would normally use to go out to eat. Now it's being used to wash your clothes so you can go in the office. So you can't just do your work in your pajamas anymore. Now you actually have to wear, the clothes in order to go back into the office. So it's forcing you to spend more money. This is why it's great for the people who own the buildings. It's great for, the owners of these corporations, but it's bad for workers because wages have not kept up with inflation. And so therefore, people are now reducing their costs by not spending the money on the businesses that surround the office anymore. Let's continue. It says nationwide, the number of lunches bought from restaurants and other establishments fell 3% in 2024 from the year before to 19.5 billion. Fewer than were purchased even in 2020, the height of the pandemic work from home era, according to the consumer analytics from Circana. Meanwhile, purchases of food from grocery and other stores that shoppers intend to eat at home or bring to work for lunch climbed 1%. So those grocery stores that are in the urban and suburban areas where there's not too many offices nearby, those stores are actually getting more of the money because the grocery stores are actually benefiting now. But at the same time, it's actually cheaper to make your own food at home than it is to go into the office. And so those locals places are now starting to get more profit. But at the same time, if you own a food store, a salad bar, or a sandwich shop, or what have you, or a burger joint that's right near the offices, well, you're hurting more. And that's because the offices that you service as these small businesses that may be surrounding them, well, these bosses are not paying the workers that would normally buy your food a living wage, or they're not paying them enough in order to be able to buy lunch from you. So therefore, because of their greed, now your business suffers. And see how it's a domino effect? Add on top of that, Donald Trump's tariffs. Well, looks like on top of it, now they aren't going to be spending much more on, to pay their workers because they got to, push that cost on the workers when it comes to the food prices and things like that. But also, you as a business owner, you now have to pay tariffs on things that are imported out of countries that actually may have a tariff slap on it now. So you're actually making even more money, which honestly, to be honest with you, this is actually going to further kill small businesses. It's a domino effect. Bethany Kennedy, an attorney near Buffalo, New York, says she used to spend $500 a month going out to lunch during the week. Rising costs, including a jump in her property taxes, made her reconsider. Now she limits herself to one lunch out a week when she's really craving it. She brings in pre-made meals such as Southwest salads with corn, beans, cheese, and tortilla strips, or Stouffer's 3-cheese rigatoni from her local Aldi the rest of the week. She revels in saving money, but there's a downside. She says, "I'm starting to get bored. The shift is a threat to the ecosystem of delis, cafes, and other office area eateries that are already went through near extinction of the 2020 pandemic lockdowns, when thousands closed for good and others struggled serving takeout for months." It says in downtown Boston, most full-service restaurants haven't resumed lunch service post-COVID. That was from Michael J. Nichols, president of the Downtown Boston Alliance. Now, you know who else is going to suffer? Coffee shops, because people aren't going to start spending $3, $4, $5 for a coffee when they can start making their coffee at home, put it in a mug, and bring it with them to work. So all these coffee shops, they're going to take a hit too. Watch. And plus, a lot of these offices, they got their own coffee makers in them. People are going to start bringing their coffee from home and making their coffee fresh at the office. So if you got a coffee shop, you're in for a wild ride too, right? It's going to affect people. He said, "We're still not back at foot traffic levels that approached 2019. The Alliance is now on alert for how new tariffs and the recession fears will affect visits to fast casual restaurants." So it continues, says restaurants in the city business development groups have been stepping up their game to woo more lunchtime customers back. So it talks about luring in more customers, especially with like live music and things like that. So they're playing live jazz and things like that. So ultimately, it says many workers say they just can't afford the price of grabbing a quick bite out. Hybrid office workers spend an average of $21.06 on lunch in 2024, up from $16 in 2023, according to a study of 2,000 full-time U.S. workers by Owl Labs, a video conferencing company. Bear with me really quick. I have to take a quick break, and I'll be right back. Transplant issues. Whoo, that kidney is working hard. Okay. So yeah, as far as the people, they're saying this ain't working. This ain't it. This ain't it, fam. It says in a recent LinkedIn poll, 71% of about 4,250 respondents said they had made a resolution to bring their lunch to work more often. Yet new habits can be tough to forge. And so people are talking about how is, you have boredom because you have the same things over and over, which can get boring. So you can't have things, the same thing every single day, unless it's something that you really, really favor. But yeah, a lot of people can't do that. And then some people are still getting used to it and forgetting their lunches and things like that. But for the most part, this is one of the biggest issues right now facing Americans, is that in order to curb the financial burden that they're faced with, they now have to start bringing their lunch from home. And so this is really a sign of the times. This is America's new normal, is that people aren't able to really spend their money at small businesses anymore, because if you're not paying people enough to live, to thrive, then you're not going to shop. This goes into why many millennials and Gen Z, we're not having kids. Like the birth rate's is dropping, because if we can't afford it, look, I'd rather spend $10 on a box of condoms than spend hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime, or 18 to 21 years for a kid, because we can't afford it. I'm wrapping it up. You know what I'm saying? Because the thing is, like, we're not gonna have, no. Like, how much a Plan B cost? Because we can't afford it, right? People are like, well, people aren't, opting for, buying homes. We can't afford it. So do you think that we're actually going to give priority to restaurants and sandwich shops and burger joints? No. We got bills to pay. Look, my light bill takes precedent over a tuna melt. Okay. So unfortunately, this is what happens when you have corporate control over our government. And so now the corporations are starting to pay for it. And it ain't looking good. But just to let you guys know, this is what's going on. And a lot of restaurants, once they start to make less money, guess what they do? Start cutting. They cut their staff. Guess what? That means more layoffs. Less people working. And so what does that do to the economy? Breaks it down even further, right? More restaurants, because they're not planning for that big old lunch rush anymore. They're buying less food, meaning the suppliers and the supply chain, they're not going to make as much. When they start making less, or being ordered from less by these restaurants, guess what they need to do? Going to cut. And some of these workers that work at these places where they actually are in part of the supply chain, right? You have Cisco and US Foods and all these other companies. And so then it goes into the farmers, right? And so the farmhands are going to start hiring less farmhands. The farmers are going to start hiring less farmhands to help with the cultivation and the harvesting, because they're not being asked for as much anymore. And then those people get cut. See the cycle? So that's a reality. That's America's new normal. And if the corporations really want to play that game, that greed game, well, looks like they're going to starve themselves out. Go ahead and hit the like. Thank you so very much. This was an interesting segment to get into. Thank you very much again for this from Roger Meadows. Let's get into the chat. All right. Let me see. So Tim Price says, it's smart to make your own food. You know way more about what's in your food, and it saves money. In my opinion, eating out is a luxury unless you have no choice. We should be cooking and preparing our own meals, in my opinion. That's true. Unfortunately, there are some people who work a lot of hours, and so they just don't have time to be able to make their meals. But at the same time, they're also not making enough in order to be able to really eat out. So what do some of these people do? They'll go and they'll get the cheap stuff, the fast food, in order to sustain themselves. And that's still not good either. And so you're working all these hours, but you're still not making enough. And so you don't have time to cook. And it's just a vicious cycle. That's what capitalism does. But yeah, it's also true, Tim. This is also a great point too from Jacqueline. Says could also be a time factor as well. Might not have enough time during the break to go on an eating establishment. Yeah, because you got to wait in line, and everybody goes to lunch around the same time, which means there's going to be a long line, and then you have to eat really quick and then go back, right? Versus going to the break room. And you may have to wait a couple minutes for the microwave, because people have to heat up their food, but it's not going to be anywhere near as long to go there than it is to go to a restaurant, because you have to travel to the restaurant. You have to leave work, go, depending on the size of the parking lot or the parking garage, you have to go to your car. Then you have to travel to the restaurant that you want to go to. Or if it's within walking distance, how long is it going to take to walk there? By the time you get there, find a parking space, then you're going to have to go inside the establishment, figure out what you want if you don't know what you want, and then you get in line and wait, and then you finally are able to order your food. Then that food has to take time to be prepared because it's not ready to go right then and there. Then you either eat there, or if you're going to bring it back to the office, either or, you're going to have to travel all the way back to the office, park your car, go through the parking lot, get back in the office, get to the break room, and then sit down and eat your lunch, which means that you don't have much time to eat. You better watch out for that indigestion. That's a whole nother thing. Chris C says, costs too much to get fast food, in my opinion. Better to bring it from home, but it takes time to buy and make all your food. Yep. And yes, Jacqueline, so landlords can make extra rent on commercial properties. Yep, it's true. Roger says, look at all that weight you lost. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. 250,000 likes. Yeah. That tweet got 250,000 likes. Yeah. Because it was so true. Everybody was thinking, like, why do we have to go back to the office? It doesn't make any sense. But it's all about money. Tax breaks. Subsidies. And it doesn't go to the workers. It goes to the people at the top. All one same says if workers don't go to a workplace, the rentier class that owns the properties will miss out on their rent. If companies will no longer rent their places. Yep, absolutely. Let's see. Yeah, Roger says leftovers from dinner last night, lunch tomorrow. Yeah, but that can be kind of redundant, because you're eating the same thing. And some people want that variety. And I hate the phrase beggars can't be choosers, but in this case, it's kind of that's just the way it is, you know, unless, you know, you prepare for the week, but then that means you have to make different meals for each different day. And that's a lot in itself. You know what I mean? So, but that's interesting. Elena says, sorry, just coming in. Why are you apologizing? There's no need to apologize. That's the thing that I think it kind of, I feel bad because I have a lot of viewers who apologize for missing a live or coming in late. And I'm like, life be lifing, baby. There's no need to apologize. I don't delete my lives so that, you know, and you guys are like, oh man, I missed it, I won't be able to watch it. You know what I mean? There's no need to apologize. I don't care if you got caught up, you know, just relaxing, doing nothing, right? You probably needed that time to relax and do nothing. It's okay. It's okay. You know, I'm just glad you're here. You know, thank you very much. Roger says, JB, look for remote work. I'll try. I'm going to try, especially because now, you know, I'm on immunosuppressive medicine. And so I'm trying not to be as in front of people, at least for the first year or so post-transplant, but we'll see. But there, you know, my options are limited, but yeah. Tim Price says people eat the same thing from Wendy's every day too, though. That's also true. All right. So let's get into the next segment, because I think that this one also is really important. This is more of a local story for me, but this is indicative of what could be happening throughout the United States. And I think that we need to talk about it. So let's get into it. So let me share the thumbnail once again. So of course, we talked to Julia about North Korea and what they're doing for their people. That was a great discussion. Then we had just talked about America's new normal, how Americans are now brown bagging it, but it's a sign that the economic health of the country is drastically dwindling. And so we just talked about that. But now we're going to be getting into Florida County losing students. So this is going to be out of Orange County Public Schools. This is going to be an interesting story to get into, especially in regards to education. So let's get into this right now. Florida school district will lose millions. So let's get into that right now. You know, education is one of the benefits of living in a modern society, public education, I should say. But unfortunately, because of the way our system is set up, there's going to be many people who suffer because the system is set up to push for a more corporate-centered system versus one that's just a public good for the people. And as a product of Orange County Public Schools education, I feel like as this empire circles the drain, it's only going to get worse from here. So I want to get into this article. And this is going to be out of the Orlando Sentinel. Let's get into this. So this is out of the Orlando Sentinel. It says, Orange School District to lose 3,100 students millions in funds next year. So, of course, we're going to go over this. It says Orange County Public Schools is expected to lose about 3,100 students and $27.8 million in state funding for the next school year, a loss that has prompted fears about teacher layoffs in crowded classrooms. In a recent memo to employees, OCPS said that their expected loss of state money will have major implications on one of the state's largest school districts and will mean all departments must reduce their operating budgets by 2%. Quote, we must be strategic and innovative in our approach to budgeting, prioritizing the initiatives that have the greatest impact on student outcomes, end quote. The projected drop in enrollment is the biggest since the 20 to 2021 school year, which saw a 10,000 student decline in the wake of the pandemic. That was from Scott Howat. It says the COVID era enrollment declines were offset by the arrival of the federal pandemic funding, but that money dries up this school year. Declining birth rates. Remember what I talked about those of us who are millennial and Gen Z, we ain't having kids because we can't afford them. Declining birth rates and the expansion of the state's voucher program, which provides state-funded scholarships to any interested student, are driving OCPS in current enrollment drop. The state expanded the voucher program in 2023, wiping out family income requirements, and voucher use has jumped 67% since then. Because schools are funded on a per pupil basis, declining enrollment means a drop in state money. Basically meaning that now that that the state is pushing charter schools, that money that would go to the district is now being funneled into charter schools. Remember how unpopular the whole Medicare for all who want it was that Pete Buttigieg proposed? It wasn't a single payer healthcare system, but it was what they call a public option. Well, they're doing the same thing, and they have been doing the same thing in regards to public education. There is a public option. So you can either do a charter school or you can go to a regular public school. Well, since a lot of parents are now opting in for the charter school, well, that takes money away from the public schools, meaning that now who is going to be worse off? It's going to be the students that are still at public schools. And we'll get into the flaws within charter schools in a little bit. But this is something that a lot of people don't regard. But a lot of students are enrolling into charter schools. But at the same time, it also is going to cause a drop in enrollment at the public schools, which are funded on a per pupil basis. So it says, Howard said, Orange County was not alone in seeing enrollment loss, as 47 out of the 67 other Florida school districts are also projecting that they'll enroll fewer students next year. The district is pushing the state legislature to increase the per student allocation to help alleviate the funding shortfall. It says, and OCPS's goal is to keep teachers in classrooms. How it said, our hope is that we can retain our teachers. We need as many teachers as we can get. Clinton McCracken, president of Orange County's Teachers Union, said that the statement that the school board had a responsibility to prevent staffing shortages in overcrowded classrooms that could come from a funding shortfall. It is critical that the district and school board prioritize protecting classrooms from cuts. Our students cannot afford larger class sizes or fewer staff. Now, Howard said that the district would send teachers additional information about possible school assignment changes once the state budget is finished, which she said could come out at the end of the week. Teachers might need to switch schools as the enrollment drops might be more severe at some campuses than others. So this is bad. This is bad. It says before the district considers cutting institutional positions, it needs to look at what programs it can go without. People are the best choice for our students, teachers, high quality teachers. OCPS continues to lose students and then subsequently lose funding to school choice vouchers. Gallo said that the district needs to be more competitive. She said OCPS can look into district-run charter and micro schools, which could offer parents more choices. In order to stay competitive, we're going to have to be innovative. We are going to have to change how the public education works. If a proposed state law passes, OCPS could also lose $17 million from the state programs like advanced placement and international baccalaureate courses, which could cause some high school students to pay out of pocket for materials and exams. So ultimately what happens is if you still have a child that is still in public school, they're going to fare worse now because of these budgeting shortfalls. Because a lot of parents are now sending their kids to charter schools, unfortunately, your kid that's still in public school suffers. So a lot of these things that are necessarily in public schools get cut, which means that their education, the quality of their education goes down. So I want to share this video that goes over charter schools. And I think this is going to be one where it's once he gets into it, you guys are going to see the gist of why charter schools really is a disadvantage to students. So let's get into it.
There are a lot of myths out there about charter schools that I think this report helps dispel. And so for those that don't know, charter schools are publicly funded but privately owned schools.
Okay, so first of all, publicly funded but privately owned, meaning they get their money from the government, but when it comes to actually running it, the government does not have that big of a say. You get where it's coming from now? All right, let's let the man continue.
Emerged in the 1990s and were sold as an innovative alternative to traditional public schools. At this time, there was a lot of talk about how the U.S. educational system was falling behind. And the idea was that if we could bring a market-based and competitive approach to education, we could see better results. Freed from regulation, charters could develop a unique curriculum and figure out what works best for the 21st century. And charters had been a relatively new phenomenon, and without a longer-term assortment of data, myths about the inherent superiority of charters have been allowed to persist unchecked. But now, almost 30 years into this experiment, we have more data, and the results are not looking good. The Network for Public Education just published a report called Broken Promises, an analysis of charter school closures from 1999 to 2017. It is a comprehensive study that looked at all charter schools and how long they stayed open. After all, at the most basic level, one judge's success would be if a school can even keep its doors open. They also look at data from specific cities, especially those with high poverty, as these are the communities that charter schools claim to be helping the most. Let's start with New Orleans, which is somewhat of a unique sample. After Hurricane Katrina devastated the city, school privatizers saw an opportunity, and the entire city school system became privatized. This has only brought more instability, the report says. It says charter churn is baked into the New Orleans model. More than 35 charter schools in the city shut down between 2006, the year following Hurricane Katrina, and 2017. Surviving schools are frequently taken over by new operators who often have a very different mission and vision for the school. The days of stable schools rooted in New Orleans communities and governed by local elected school boards are gone. Charters appear and then they are gone. The promise of better opportunities for local children has become a promise broken over and over again.
So this is what happens when you try to privatize public education. A market-based approach to a public good. When you have the profit model introduced to even elementary, middle, and high school education, when you introduce a market-based approach, that means that some people are going to lose out. That means that some people are going to suffer. Because now you're erecting a wall, a paywall between yourself and your education, or yourself and the education of your students. And so even though it is publicly funded, it's privately ran. Meaning, guess what? There are now going to be ways to maximize as much of that public money to be profit so that they can have more for their shareholders, or they won't call them shareholders, but essentially they're shareholders. And so who suffers? The children suffer. So let's continue.
It gets even worse at the national level. The report goes on. Between 1998 and 2015, more than 9,000 charter schools in the U.S. opened and enrolled students. However, more than 3,700 of those schools closed. Of the 606 charters that began serving students in 1999, only 256, or 42%, were still open in 2017. Now, some charter school advocates try to argue that this constant churn is actually a good thing. It's good when bad schools are forced to close. It helps innovation keep happening. But anyone, whether a student, parent, or teacher who has experienced a school closing, knows that it only causes disruption that is terrible for education, let alone social and emotional health. There are endless, heartbreaking stories of sudden charter school closures upending communities. Ashe Preparatory Academy in Seattle closed literally 1 month after opening, stranding 140 elementary school children. Conditions have become so bad that teachers just quit en masse and stopped coming to work. In Tennessee, Nashville's New Vision Academy charter school suddenly closed mid-year after safety violations, overcrowding, and financial issues. The school actually never had an occupancy permit, and 158 students had to scramble to find a new school. So many of you are probably wondering, how can so many charters be closing like this when it's so bad for children's education? And you're right to wonder this, but in some ways it's missing the point. This is what happens when you introduce the business model to education, which should be a public good. What does make sense or what doesn't make sense for education makes a lot of sense for the bottom line of profit.
That's what I have been saying. Because it's not the students that benefit. It is the people at the top. Because your student, your kid becomes the product. This is why a market-based approach doesn't work in public education, because public education is a public good. And yet some people will say, well, they're doing better with our kids. Are they? Because my question is, why don't we just take that funding and just fund public education better? And people say, well, you're just throwing money at the problem. You're throwing money at the problem by allowing these charter schools. That's throwing money at the problem. The only difference is that the money that you're throwing, it's not all going to the students. It's going to the people at the top.
Broken Promises report, I think, put it best when it said, Success in the prevailing competitive model of education depends on many things, but first and foremost on filling enrollment goals. If founders are struggling to keep the school afloat, it is in their narrow self-interest to keep staff and families in the dark lest they leave the school, thus accelerating and ensuring its downfall. We now have 30 years of data on charter schools, and the numbers don't lie. They have not proven to be the shiny new savior of education that they claim to be. And while we know charters are privately owned, it can be hard to trace exactly how people profit from charter schools. Often they are classified as or mixed up with nonprofits, blurring the lines of their financial operations. Charter schools usually become registered as a nonprofit that gets funding from the state and then gives these funds to a for-profit company to manage the school and provide services. Recently, Jacobin interviewed Carol Burris from the Network for Public Education, who described how this process works, saying, the for-profit then either directly provides services, from management services to cafeteria services, or they contract out with another for-profit company to provide services. Either way, the goal is to run the charter school in such a way that there's money left over. And the more money they save by doing things like hiring unqualified teachers and refusing to teach students with special needs, the more money is left at the end of the day.
So the money that they would use per pupil is reduced. So it's actually faring worse for kids because they got to get theirs. Versus in a public school where it's considered a public good, they maximize the amount of money that goes to per student. You see why the profit model should not be in education. And I say this is why the profit model should also not be in higher education. This goes into things like tuition costs and like colleges and universities. Ooh, that's a good topic for discussion. Let's continue.
And this gets at another way the data of charter schools can be skewed in an unfair way. Public schools have a commitment to educate all children, including children with special needs. We cannot deny a child because they require extra resources or make our task in the classroom more challenging. Any teacher knows that having a classroom with multiple students with individualized educational needs can change the whole dynamic. But the profit making does not stop at the services the for-profit company provides. It also extends to real estate. And so Carol Burrows also explains, real estate is another way management companies often use to make profits. They get all kinds of tax advantages and low interest loans to buy a property, and then they lease the property at a big profit to their charter schools. Public money goes into the charter nonprofit and goes out to the for-profit real estate company, which owns the building. So essentially, you have the taxpayer paying the mortgage. And then after the mortgage is paid off, they'll sell it to the charter school at an inflated price. And what's worse, there's virtually no oversight over these financial operations, unlike with public schools. This is partly why when a charter suddenly closes due to fraud or mismanagement, it comes as a shock to the students and the public. In public schools, school districts are elected or at least appointed by an elected official like a mayor. If you don't like what they're doing, you can vote them out. The boards of nonprofits are privately appointed, and many charters have billionaires and their friends sitting on the board overseeing operations they make money off of. This complete lack of oversight leads to countless scandals of fraud and mismanagement. In San Diego, heads of the A3 charter school were found guilty of embezzling $210 million through their school. They also bought children's personal information to falsely enroll them in the schools and pocket the money that was provided for services for these non-existent students. In 2018, the owner of the Goodyear Charter School in Arizona was accused of fraud, which led to a sudden closure of the school. And let's take a look at that incident.
Standing behind their attorney, former teachers and staff of the now shuttered charter school are accusing the school's owner of using state funds to live a life of luxury.
There were things that were purchased on personal credit cards that school funds were used to pay off. The janitorial staff for the school used to clean his personal residence.
He's talking about this man, Daniel Hughes, seen here in a 2015 interview. Hughes sent out this email to parents and teachers last Monday stating financial woes had made it impossible to keep the school open despite already receiving more than $2 million from the state. Attorneys for the teachers say those problems were self-inflicted.
Well, the cooks from the school used to cater and sponsor parties at his house, his daughter's first birthday party. These aren't allegations. These are facts.
Now, to be fair, these kinds of examples are exceptionally bad, and there are many charters that operate without scandals. And of course, mismanagement can and does happen in public schools. But the sheer volume of instances involving charter schools, resulting from the clear lack of transparency and oversight, indicates that there is a big problem here. And I want to be clear, the enemy here is not parents that send their kids to charter schools or students or teachers. Many families send their kids to charters because they face a very difficult and practical choice. If their public school is chronically underfunded and doing terribly, it's hard to blame them for wanting to give charters a try. So we need to be careful not to target the wrong people. Also, we need to be able to talk about this with a degree of nuance. I used to substitute teach in charter schools in Philadelphia for a couple of years, which gave me a broad picture of a wide array of charter schools. Now, some of the charters I taught at were worse than average public schools. Many were around the same, and some were better than the average public schools. But for those that were better, it was clear why. They had a lot of resources, a lot of programs, small class sizes, a brand new building. They got public money plus private money, and these resources made a better outcome.
So he also brings up another good point. You can't blame parents for wanting a better education for their kids. And so what happens is these charter schools are dangled in front of parents, right? So here's what they do. It's the Finding Nemo aquarium effect. Anybody who watched the Disney movie Finding Nemo, there's a part in the movie where they want to get out. So what do? They have Nemo throw a rock into the turbine for the filter, and it stops the filter. It stops the water filtration system. And so then the water gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. And so that means that aquarium essentially has to get cleaned out, and the water has to have to get rid of that dirty water. It's the same thing what they did with public education. What they'll do is called death by 1,000 cuts, as they will cut and cut and cut and cut public education to the point where the students start to suffer. And then they'll take that same money and go, hey, here's a charter school, right, that your kid can go to so that your kid can get a better education. Because look at these public schools, they're not doing good. But it's because they cut them so much that they can't do good. And so then you desperately want your kid to have a good education, so you send them to the charter school. And then the charter school gets that money, that public money that would have went to that public school, but now it's going to the charter school. And some people will go, well, the charter school is actually doing better. Well, yeah, because the charter school is actually getting the money and they're getting better funding than per pupil than the public school. And then you also may have some private money that may come in to make it even better. And so then students are able to thrive in that school, not because it's charter, but because it's well funded. And it's the same thing. If you were to well fund public education, the same effects can happen there too. But the problem is that they cut and cut and cut and cut so that you'll go to the charter school, and then the charter school will end up making profit off of your kid, and they probably will give equal or worse education than they still would have gotten at a public school. And then who's running out the back door with the money? And so ultimately, it's about the notion to privatize. Because if you privatize something, that means that it's not available to everyone. It's not available to all students. It's available to some students. It's available to some students that are chosen by them. Charter schools can choose which students come into their classrooms, versus public schools take every single student that it enrolls. Because public education is seen as a public good, whereas charter schools, really, education is a privilege. I, for one, think that public education, really all education, is a public good, because it should not be gate-kept away from certain undesirables. Let's continue.
The point is that it's not much of a secret of what makes schools good schools. They need robust funding and support to create quality conditions and programs. Of course, public schools that have been drastically underfunded for generations are not going to be doing well. We need to support our existing public schools properly. Then parents won't be forced to make a choice about whether to send their kids to a charter or not. Families in affluent communities with well-funded public schools don't need to make this choice, and that's what everyone deserves. While we should be understanding of why families choose charters and not target them, ultimately we have to follow the money and be clear about what the overall project of charter schools is and how they actively damage public schools. Remember, charters receive public funding that could and should be going to existing public schools. Let's listen to educators in California talk about how charter schools affect their school funding.
What's happened with the proliferation of so many charter schools is that sometimes it just becomes a parallel school district, and it actually bleeds away money from the neighborhood schools.
When a student leaves to attend a charter school, the money we spend to educate them follows. But the student's old public school can't reduce its costs by that same amount. It can't spend less for AC or heat. Its principal can't work part-time. To make up the difference, the school has to cut arts and music classes, lay off its librarian or nurse, clean its bathrooms less, or pay teachers so little they need another job to support their families. A first-of-its-kind study of 3 California districts found that on average, charter schools are taking over $1,000 a year from the education of each neighborhood school student. Charter schools cost San Diego's district nearly $66 million during the 2016-17 school year alone. In a state where public schools already struggle for resources, allowing more charter schools is making things worse for many students and threatening the very meaning of public education itself.
Well, the value of public education is critical because it's the underpinnings of democracy. Because every single student that comes through our door, unlike charter schools, we accept. And we must serve and give them the best possible education. And there's a cost to serving any student that comes across our threshold.
We need to invest in our public schools, and not even just for education's sake. Public education has been central for creating and sustaining our democracy. Again, it is a commitment to invest in every child, no matter their class status or race or whatever is going on in their life. It's not a coincidence that public education came to the South as part of the wave of reforms that took place after the Civil War during Reconstruction, that brief period of time when African Americans could and did exercise their democratic rights before Jim Crow. And public schools were seen as crucial to the advancement of Black communities. Author Derek W. Black wrote eloquently about the connection between public education and our democracy, saying, "Over and over again, when America makes big leaps forward in guaranteeing the right to a public education, it's articulated as a necessary component of fulfilling the promise of democracy. This thread runs throughout American history. Each moment that democracy is expanded, such as with the first and second Reconstructions, public education has been massively expanded too. And each moment that democracy is contracted, such as with Jim Crow and the backlash to the Civil Rights Movement, the assault on public education has happened alongside that contraction." But I do think the tide is starting to turn, and more people are beginning to see it. As I said before, charters are no longer the shiny new kid on the block. We have a wide body of experience with them and are seeing the results. more organizations are turning a critical eye to them. A few years ago, the NAACP and the Movement for Black Lives came out and demanded a moratorium on new charter expansion, citing their role in increasing school segregation. Let's listen to NAACP official Hillary Schulten talk about it.
What we had during those times and thereafter were charter schools that were being put in place in many places to undercut many of the policies and protections civil rights has provided. Things like, for instance, making sure that teachers at least have a degree and are certified before they teach. That's a minimum standard. Many charter schools went around that and even hired teachers without degrees at all, creating all kinds of other problems. We had charter schools that were carpetbaggers. That is, they'd come in, and before they could figure out that the charter school was not providing the service, the charter school was gone. Now, look, you're right. There are some charter schools that have proven effective, but if you go back and talk to the assistant secretaries for civil rights in the Department of Education, the last two, you'll find all the suits that have been filed because charter schools are being utilized in places like Mississippi, Alabama, and North Carolina as tools to maintain segregation. So in essence, that's why we're calling for a moratorium. We've got to take a closer look at this. There's a big problem with how these schools are being utilized in so many areas.
There is a deep connection between what goes on in charter schools and what goes on in your neighborhood public school. As some viewers know, I've taught in Philly public schools for the last 5 years. I've talked about the terrible conditions most schools face: 80-year-old buildings with mold, lead, and asbestos, roofs caving in, classrooms of 40 students. And at the same time, we see brand new charter school buildings going up. Of course, those children deserve to have a good building, but we can do that for all public schools and not drain money away from some schools to give to others. The charter school movement is part of the overall neoliberal project to privatize more and more aspects of our lives that should be social. Education is about developing our capacities as human beings to the fullest. The profit motive does not have a role here. And as the data shows, for-profit education is not even succeeding by its own standards. So I'll end with a line from a public school teacher, Peter Green's blog in the Huffington Post, where he says, "Modern charters are not public schools, and they do not make a public school commitment to stay and do the work over the long haul. They are businesses, and they make a business person's commitment to stick around as long as it makes sense to do so. That does not make them evil, but it does make them something other than a public school. And it underlines another truth: students are not their number one priority."
So ultimately, this is what's happening here in Orange County, is that the students are no longer the number one priority. And it's, parents are really under duress because now they're making the choice because they want their kid to actually have a good education. And now they're opting for a charter school instead of having them go through a regular public education, which, if it was well funded, can be just as good, right? Think about this. When I was in high school, we didn't have wood shop. We didn't have metal shop. There was no pool for swim classes. There's all these things that a lot of these schools, like the more affluent schools, they have way more resources. Like, for instance, I went to Oak Ridge High School, right, in my first 2 years. And then I went to a magnet high school for, to learn a trade. But Oak Ridge High School had way less resources than, say, a Dr. Phillips High School. Dr. Phillips High School actually was in a more affluent area. Yes, it was a public school, but because schools are funded by property tax, then they actually receive better funding. And so it goes to show that, the education, when a school is well funded, it actually creates better results. But the problem is that, well, the cappies, they want to get their grubby little hands on the education so that they can make more money off of our kids. At the end of the day, public education really is a public good, and it should be treated as such. And this is why I am against charter schools myself. But at the same time, I'm not going to blame parents for sending their kids to a charter school, because that's more of a individualistic blame game. I blame the system for allowing charter schools to exist in the first place. And it's basically creating a two-tiered education system among our kids. Just like, you know, the public option versus single-payer healthcare created a two-tiered healthcare system. Same thing with charter schools and public schools. I don't want there to be two tiers. Everybody should have a level playing field when it comes to their education. And also, a lot of charter schools, they will deny kids, especially those who are special needs, they'll deny them as well. And that's not fair at all. Special needs being kids that may have disabilities, whether they be intellectual disabilities, neurodivergence, or they have physical disabilities. And that's also not fair. Because if it's a public good, it should be treated as a public good. Because if you're not willing to serve all the people, that means you're willing to let some of the people fall by the wayside. And it's just not the way we should center society. So go ahead and give the stream a like. Thank you so very much. Let's get into some of the comments in the chat, and then we will head on out. All right. So, let me see here. All right. Eliana says, watching and listening from the United States colony of Puerto Rico. Welcome. Bienvenido. We have All One Same says, yep, charter schools. Some have for-profit companies running them. Don't deliver. Absolutely. Tim Price says, not to mention that private corporations can influence the curriculum and they can teach kids whatever they want to. Yeah. And you don't have a vote in that because they're private boards. They're not voted on. Let me see. Good to see you, Akilia Grigors. Roger Meadows says, you know, this is not an issue in communities with high property value, with high property taxes, mostly white suburban communities. Yep, absolutely. You see, Roger continues, says, Florida can run a CBI to trade in property tax for state income tax, abolish one, reintroduce the other. Charter local public banks to finance school districts based on tax from cell tower usage. Use public banks to finance public education. That's also a really good idea, Roger. Thank you very much for that. Jay says, a congressman once said, if we need a doctor, we will pluck one from a private school. We won't fund public schools because those kids will go to jail or serve me coffee. And that's classism. Definitely. Thank you for that. Roger says, we might have to reconsider community homeschooling. Public schools will never do what Linus said. Check DM. I can't because I got to go to the bathroom. In fact, just give me 1 second. Okay, so let me go there really quick. Oh man, Roger, thank you very much. Thank you for this. This is actually a really good point. And he shared this. This is true. No one is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. So yeah, that is true. And so ultimately, if charter schools are ran by these people at the top, then they're not going to give you education. Hell, they've influenced public education so that you don't learn about people like Fred Hampton. You know, you don't learn about Nat Turner's rebellion. You don't learn about what the United States has been doing as far as regime change all over the world. And so ultimately, when it comes to public education, you know, charter schools, they would never, ever talk about different economic models. No, because they don't want you to if they do, it's going to be in a negative way, but they're not going to give you just the cold, hard facts because they don't want you to make up your mind and go, wait, this one sounds better for us. Why aren't we doing this? Right? Because those kids become future citizens. No, not citizens. Oh, sorry. They become future adults that can influence the country. And if you have enough of them, that changes the system, that changes the culture. So, yeah. Thank you very much for that, Roger. Let me see. Chris says China's Article 9 spells it out clearly. Citizens of the People's Republic of China shall have the right and duty to be educated. Citizens shall enjoy equal opportunity of education regardless of their ethnic community, race, sex, occupation, property, or religious belief, etc. This is under educational law. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Like, we can literally do the same thing here. Cobra Commander says, YouTube be hiding your whole channel, JB. I had to enter my subscription to even go to your channel. Yeah, I'm heavily suppressed. This is why, you know, we talk about subscribe, things like that. Wait, how many subscribers am I at right now? Hang on. I'm at 4,974. So I'm 26 subs away from 5,000. 26 subs. So if you guys would like, go ahead and subscribe. Because ultimately I'm trying to, my goal has been 5,000 for this year. And so a couple things happened. My goal, get a kidney transplant, got it. And my next goal of getting 5,000 subs, almost there, just 26 more people. 26. What is that? Like, you know, 26 people. Look, there are people who are watching my channel that have not subscribed yet. But you guys, you watch regularly. You might as well subscribe. Come on now. What is it going to cost you to just click that and change that red box to gray? You know what I mean? Anyhow, but yeah, so channel is heavily suppressed, but that's neither here nor there. That's, you know, just the way the algo works. But all in same says education in the United States is about conformity, not critical thinking or open-mindedness. I agree. They want people to be good little workers in the cog. The thing is like, it's not It's not that we need to get rid of our Department of Education, but the fact is that we need to change it so that it encourages critical thinking and open-mindedness. But if you do that, then that gets rid of the system of control that the corporations have over our government. That's what they don't want. Because then you're going to start looking at corporations and go, oh, you guys are a bunch of greedy bastards that just want us to serve you. And we're not about to do that. And yeah. So I'm about to head on out, Raj. Okay. Okay. It's not there. Okay. So let me check on this. Wait. Hold on. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let me share this, and then that'll probably be my last one. So let's see here. So Roger just screenshot this. Of course, it says, while the United States Constitution doesn't explicitly guarantee a right to education, it is recognized as a basic human right internationally. Cobra Commander said, oh, let me put a mute on that. Basic human right internationally within the context of education laws in many states. Says the U.S. in the U.S., the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause has been applied to ensure equal educational opportunities, and many state constitutions also guarantee a right to public education. It says elaboration, international recognition, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted in 1948, and numerous other international treaties, like the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, recognize education as a fundamental human right. U.S. constitutional context said U.S. Constitution doesn't explicitly mention the education right. But, however, the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause has been interpreted to prohibit discrimination in education. Additionally, the 10th Amendment allows states to establish their own educational policies. State-level guarantees, many state constitutions include a right to a free and adequate education. Sorry. Many states' constitutions include a right to free and adequate education for all children within state lines. This has led to legal challenges and advocacy efforts related to adequate school funding resources. While not guaranteed under the right of federal constitution, education in the U.S. Is focused on providing equal access to education for all, particularly through the public education system. Examples of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination in education, and the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA, ensures that students with disabilities have access to special education services. Thank you very much for this, Roger, because a lot of times charter schools don't have to follow by a lot of these guidelines when it comes to their education. And it's sad because the thing is like, this is what happens when you introduce the for-profit model into a public good. When you introduce the for-profit model to a public good, then that public good is no longer for the public. It ceases to be a public good. It starts to become a privilege instead of a right. It starts to become a privilege instead of a necessity. This is why I disagree with the whole premise of, the same thing with healthcare. Healthcare is a necessity. Healthcare should be a public good. So therefore, we should have education available for all, despite whatever economic situation you are. In fact, nobody should have to pay for a service. We should all pool our resources together and have a nationalized healthcare system. I think we should also do the same thing for our education system, where every single student has equal opportunity Of course, you're going to have to do it somewhat equitably for students who are in different disadvantaged positions. But yes, equally and equitably provide education to all, no matter who you are. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Chris C says it should explicitly say it though, because originalists will point the finger at the plain language, but that's a whole larger battle to actually amend the federal constitution. I agree. It's more implied instead of said specifically. So that's why the Constitution actually should be either amended or changed to fit that. I agree. All right. So be sure to tune in later today. I will be on another show. So this evening, I'm at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will be on the New Party podcast. So if you guys would like to, I will be there. So this will be a interesting subject. So this is going to be, let me share the screen. It's called the New Party podcast that I'll be on later tonight. And it is Are Democrats Turning into Communists? So it talks about we're going to be talking about the future of the Democratic Party. So this should be a really interesting chat to get into. In fact, I'm going to put the link in chat if you guys want to see at 8 p.m. Eastern. And you guys know my thoughts, so we'll be getting into that. But yes, 8 p.m. Eastern. So in a couple hours, I'll be live on this channel, and I'll be a guest there. So if you guys would like to, you guys can go and hit it up and pull up when it goes live. Okay. So with that being said, other than that, be sure to tune into the Savvy and JB show this Thursday. And I'm going to try to do resume my readings. Now that I don't have dialysis, I have more time, so I can be able to do that. So that's awesome. And let me see I have a guest coming on next week. And this guest is a special guest. So next week on the 29th, I will have Jonathan Peter Jackson. Why is this very special guest? Well, this person is related to the late George Jackson. In fact, if you guys have been with me for a long time, I read George Jackson's book, Blood in My Eye. So if you guys would like to, he is a revolutionary. And so I will be having his family member, his kin, on to talk, have a nice discussion. So that'll be next week on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you guys also have that to look forward to. Okay. All right. So, what do I always say, guys? What do I always say? Water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Yes. Smoke them if you got them. Drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny, because joy is revolutionary and reading is fundamental. All right. I love you guys for watching. Thank you so much to Julia for joining me to debunk some of the myths about DPRK. And I will see you guys in a couple hours. Well, less than a couple hours, really an hour and 45 minutes from now on the New Party podcast. Thank you so very much. Mwah! Forehead kisses. And I will see you guys in the next one. Take it away, JB. Thank you so very much for watching my channel. And I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/ Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah! Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.